They didn't say, "We're locking you in." They said, "You'll be safe here." That's the thing about betrayal. It never comes wearing its own name. It comes dressed as concern, as best interests, as a warm hand on your elbow, guiding you somewhere you never agreed to go. I didn't scream when they took my keys. I didn't grab my son's sleeve when he slid my phone out of my handbag and left it on the hallway table like clutter. I just stood there in the lobby of Rose Hill Care, looking at the polished floor and the tired flowers in the corner, trying to understand how my life had been moved without me. Thomas kissed my cheek. His lips were cold. "It's temporary, Mom. Just until we make sure you're okay." Then he walked out. I watched the glass door close behind him. 10 minutes passed, then 15, 25. No one came back to say there'd been a mistake. Behind the front desk sat a young woman with red lipstick and a nursing badge that said, Sandra. I walked over because my legs still worked and my name was still mine, as far as I knew. "When will I be allowed to leave?" I asked. She blinked at her screen, then at me. "You're checked in, Mrs. Leland. You're a full resident." I didn't sign anything. My voice shook, but the words were steady. She gave me a patient smile, the kind they practice. "Your son did. He has power of attorney." That was the first time I heard it said out loud, like a spell that erased all arguments. Power of attorney. As if motherhood ended the day a signature dried on paper I never saw. I didn't cry. Not then. They brought me to room 213. I remember the number because the door was chipped near the handle, and the lock stuck before it opened, like it was already used to keeping people in. The bed was made too tightly. Hospital tight. No wrinkles. No history. The closet was half full of my clothes, but not all of them. Someone had already decided which parts of my life fit in this room. On the windowsill sat a framed picture of my late husband, Harold. The staff probably thought that was a nice touch, a detail to make it feel like home. Except this wasn't home. Home was 117 Dare Lane, the pale yellow bungalow with the creaky porch swing. Home was the kitchen window where the bird feeder hung crooked because Harold swore he'd fix it this weekend for 15 years. Home was my chair at the table, second from the end, with the cushion that sank a little more on the left. Home was the house we bought together and paid off with double shifts, grocery store coupons, and my wrists aching from waitressing. And just like that, it was gone, turned into an address I no longer owned. That first night I didn't sleep. Every 30 minutes, someone shuffled past my door. Slippers dragged. Someone coughed. A TV hissed 2 rooms away. Nursing homes aren't quiet. They're full of sounds, no one answers. I lay there on top of the tightly made bed, fully dressed, shoes still on, like a guest waiting for checkout. This is a mistake, I told myself. A misunderstanding. Tomorrow we'll straighten it out. Morning came. No one straightened anything out. I asked a nurse when I could speak to someone in charge. She said, "The administrator's only in on Wednesdays." It was Monday. "I'd like to call my son," I said. She checked my chart. "No phone privileges listed under your care plan." My care plan. As if I were a project. I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and folded my hands like a good patient. When you've raised a man who can smile while putting his own mother in a nursing home, you learn quickly that noise won't save you. 3 days passed. No calls. No visits. Sandra appeared at my door one afternoon with a plastic bag. "Your son cleared out some of your closet," she said. "He sent over what he didn't want to throw out." Throw out. Inside the bag. One dress, a scarf, my old winter coat, the heavy one with the broken zipper on the right pocket. That coat had been through more winters than Thomas's marriage. "You're lucky," a voice said next to me in the dining room that night. I turned. The woman was small and bird-boned, with glasses she clearly didn't need anymore. Her name tag read Hilda. "At least your family visited," she said. "Mine left me here 5 years ago and moved to Arizona. I get a Christmas card if they remember what month it is." I didn't feel lucky. I felt blurred, like someone had smudged my life with a thumb. The food tasted like it had been boiled until all the flavor evaporated and then kept going for good measure. Gray chicken, mushy peas. "Don't complain," Hilda whispered. "They say it's a mood disturbance and make you see the therapist. He smells like cough drops and failure." I didn't want therapy. I wanted my keys, my phone, my chipped bird feeder. Later, I went back to my room. The winter coat was draped over the chair, still smelling faintly of cold and last year's rain. I hung it carefully, then stopped. The right pocket sagged, the broken zipper half open like a mouth. I slipped my hand inside, the way I'd done 1,000 times in the grocery store line, feeling for receipts or old tissues. My fingers brushed against something thick and glossy, paper, folded once. I pulled it out. A lottery ticket? Powerball. The numbers were filled in with black ink, not the quick pick kind. Someone had cared enough to choose. The purchase date glared at me from the corner, 1 week ago. The same day Thomas brought me here. I turned it over. No scribbles, no coffee stains, still intact. For a long moment, I just stared at it. It could have come from someone else's life. Someone who did crazy things like buy lottery tickets and dream. I slipped it back into the pocket and hung the coat on the back of the chair, my heart beating a little faster than it had a minute before. That night, I didn't tell Hilda. I didn't tell anyone. I lay in bed, listening to the familiar chorus outside my door, the shuffling, the coughs, the hiss of some late-night game show with the coat in my line of sight. I watched the pocket, as if the ticket might wriggle out on its own and crawl away. It didn't. It just hung there, heavy with something I couldn't name yet. 3 days I carried that ticket and did nothing. I ate the gray chicken. I sat through a craft session where they handed us children's paints and called it therapy. I pretended not to see Sandra roll her eyes at a man who asked for help twice. All the while, the winter coat waited in the corner, the pocket pulling slightly to one side. On the third night, I asked again about the phone. Emergency use only, Sandra said, without looking up from her clipboard. My furnace could be on fire, I replied. You don't live in that house anymore, Mrs. Leland, she said. The sentence stuck to me like something sour. You don't live in that house anymore. As if saying it enough times made it true. That was the moment I decided the ticket in my pocket wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a door. Maybe locked, maybe rusted shut, but still a door. I waited until the night nurse came on. She was young, always tapping at her phone, the kind who still thought life was something that happened forward, not behind you. She liked me because I didn't ring the bell or cry in the dark. Sorry to bother, I told her, standing in the hallway like I'd been waiting there for hours. I think I left a hearing aid battery in my old coat. Might be in the laundry. Could I check the front desk closet? She waved me toward the station. Sure, just be quick. Don't let the alarm beep when you open the door. There was an old landline on the desk, beige, with a curly cord. No camera, no one watching. My hands didn't shake when I picked it up. I dialed manually. I still remembered how, and called the lottery information line. Automated voice, draw dates, winning numbers. I pressed the buttons, listened, then unfolded the ticket with slow, deliberate fingers. Number by number. I checked. The first matched, then the second, the third, fourth, fifth. My heart climbed into my throat. The last number matched too. Jackpot, $62 million. Unclaimed, the recorded voice said, calm as weather. I didn't smile. Not yet. I just stood there with the receiver pressed to my ear, the nurse a few feet away, scrolling through her messages, completely unaware that 10 inches of paper in my hand had just shifted the ground under all of us. When I finally hung up, I slipped the ticket back into my coat pocket and walked slowly down the hallway, as if I were carrying glass. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. My mind paced, even if my body stayed still. I had no car, no bank access, a son who controlled my signature and called it love. But for the first time since I stepped into Rose Hill, I wasn't nothing. I wasn't just someone's burden neatly stored away. I was a woman with a secret large enough to crack open the walls around me. Maybe, just maybe, that secret would change everything. The first thing you learn in a place like Rose Hill is that silence is currency. Not kindness, not patience, silence. People underestimate you when you stop reacting. And being underestimated was exactly what I needed. For 3 days after discovering the ticket, I kept my face still, my voice soft, my hands folded neatly in my lap like I'd accepted my fate. Inside, though, something had started to turn a small, tight gear I hadn't felt in years. Something like strategy. On Thursday morning, Sandra was handing out schedules for bingo and group crafts when I spoke without looking up. I'd like to speak to a lawyer. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. What? Are you suing someone? No, I said, slipping the schedule into my pocket. I just want to draft a letter. Well, your son handles all your paperwork. Then I'd like a lawyer to confirm whether that's still legal. That wiped the smile off her face. She blinked once, twice, and moved on. I didn't expect her to help me. I didn't need her to. I had already begun building my path out, one quiet step at a time. I waited until evening, when the night nurse came on duty. She didn't pay much attention to anything except her phone, which made her the most useful person in the entire building. Could I use the staff phone? I asked, lowering my voice. It's an emergency. She waved at it carelessly. Sure, just hurry. Emergency. Yes, $62 million was absolutely an emergency. I dialed my son first, not because I needed him, but because curiosity is a powerful weapon. Straight to voicemail. Then I dialed my old neighbor, Jenny. Voicemail. The silence on the other end told me what I already knew. I was on my own. Good. I hung up, looked at the phone for a moment, then dialed a different number, one I'd memorized from a tiny advertisement in the newspaper someone left behind in the common room. Elder Trust and Estate Planning. Discretion guaranteed. A woman answered. Hello. I'm calling on behalf of a relative, I said, keeping my voice steady and vague. She's in a care facility. She has financial concerns, power of attorney issues. The pause on the other end was long enough to feel meaningful. We handle cases like that frequently, the woman said at last. Would your relative like a private consultation? Yes, I replied. As soon as possible. Name? For one heartbeat, I hesitated. Then, Elaine Matthews. A name borrowed from no one. A blank space. A door that didn't exist until I spoke it. An associate can come to the facility, she said. Thursday, quietly. I thanked her, hung up, and pressed my palm against my chest, steadying myself. I didn't know what would happen next. But the moment I gave that false name, something inside me aligned like a compass that had been spinning, finally pointing north. The next morning, Sandra handed me a cold bowl of oatmeal and said, Your son still hasn't called back, huh? I smiled faintly, the way someone does when they're keeping something deliciously dangerous to themselves. At lunch, I left him a new voicemail. Hi, Thomas. I found something important in my coat, something you might be interested in. Call me. I didn't explain. Let him stew. People reveal themselves in silence more than in speech. Later that night, as the building dimmed into its version of sleep, I took out the ticket again. I studied the numbers in the glow of the hallway light, remembering the exact tone of the automated voice confirming each one. $62 million. That kind of money doesn't change who you are. It reveals who everyone else is. Thursday arrived slow and heavy. My hands trembled beneath the blanket even though my face stayed calm. At 2:29 p.m., a dark green sedan pulled up outside, neat, polished, forgettable in the deliberate way expensive things sometimes are. A man in a gray suit stepped out, carrying a leather folder. He looked like someone who knew how to keep secrets. Inside the lobby, he scanned the room, caught my eye, and approached. Elaine Matthews? He asked quietly. I nodded. That's me. He didn't flinch at the lie. Let's speak somewhere private. We slipped into the back garden, a sad little courtyard with fake plants and benches that complained under the slightest weight. He opened his folder, pen ready. My name is Andrew Myers, he said. Estate planning. You said there were issues involving power of attorney? I took a breath. It was signed under pressure, I said. My son controls everything. My accounts, my mail, my house. Do you know what he's done with your assets? I have some ideas. He scribbled something down. We can contest the power of attorney. It will take time, but it's possible. Then he looked up. What else? This was it, the moment that divided my life into a before and an after. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the envelope, and slid it across the bench. I found this, I said. He unfolded the paper. His eyes moved once across the numbers, then again. Then he looked at me, not shocked, but alert. Have you verified it? He asked. Yes. He nodded, jaw tightening slightly. Does anyone else know? No? Do you want them to? I shook my head. I want protection. From my family. Then we need to move fast, he said. He outlined the plan in calm, confident strokes. An anonymous trust, a legal shell, a protective barrier against interference, a new will, a new identity for financial matters, and a route to freedom. The money would be untouchable to anyone but me, and later to my granddaughter. Rosie, he asked, do you want to leave anything to your son? No, I said. I don't owe them what they tried to take from me. Then we build everything around the granddaughter, he replied. When we finished, he closed his folder and stood. I'll be in touch within 72 hours, he said. In the meantime, tell no one. And do not try to claim the ticket yourself. It's too dangerous. I almost laughed. I'm old, I said. Not stupid. For the first time, he smiled. When he left, I stayed on the bench another 10 minutes, letting the wind touch me like something I'd forgotten. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was the first breath of it. That night, I wrote in my notebook, Day 13 at Rose Hill. $62 million, untouched. Legal plan in motion. My name is still Doris Leland, but soon, they'll remember me as someone else. There's a trick to surviving a place like Rose Hill. Not escaping, surviving. You don't fight. You don't complain. You don't make noise. You disappear. Not physically, emotionally, behaviorally. You become small in the way they expect you to be. Harmless, agreeable, forgettable. When you stop reacting, people stop watching. And when they stop watching, you can see everything. For the next 3 days, I moved through Rose Hill like a shadow. I didn't argue when Sandra forgot my mail again. I didn't flinch when someone took my seat in the dining hall. I didn't mention when the night nurse gave me someone else's pills by accident. I didn't complain about the cold peas or the overcooked chicken. I smiled, nodded, stayed quiet. A coat rack with good posture. A piece of furniture that didn't require attention. And from that position, I learned more than I ever could have imagined. Who stole supplies from the closet? Who snuck drinks into the laundry room? Who forgot to give Clyde his meds and lied about it on the chart? Who was sleeping with the night janitor? Who falsified signatures on patient forms? I didn't write any of it down. I wasn't planning to stay long enough for justice. I needed information, not enemies. Information, after all, is its own form of currency, and I had a much larger currency tucked inside my coat sleeve. Andrew called on Monday. The trust is active, he said. The money is protected. You're officially Clara Whitmore in all financial systems related to the claim. Clara Whitmore, a name with no history and no debts. What's the balance after everything? I asked. 43.7 million, he replied evenly. I didn't gasp. Didn't tremble. I simply nodded as though we were discussing groceries. And Rosie? He flipped a page. 10 million in a locked trust. She'll have access for education, housing, emergencies. Everything else requires trustee approval, which is me, per your request. She'll be safe, I whispered. He confirmed it. I believed him. Then he hesitated, which he never did. There's something else, he said. I did a background check on your son and daughter-in-law. My stomach tightened. They've already listed your home with a private agent. Quietly, unofficially. I felt nothing. No shock, no sadness, just confirmation. They won't get a cent, I said. And they won't, he replied. The injunction is nearly ready. That afternoon, Thomas finally showed up. I watched him through the window before he saw me standing next to my car, my Camry, the one Harold picked out because he said it matched my hands. He'd replaced my bumper sticker, support local libraries, with one that said, I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right. Of course he had. He walked into Rose Hill wearing the smile he saved for polite company and police officers. Hey, Ma, he said brightly. You look good. I gave him nothing. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop off some things. His eyes flicked to my winter coat. You're still wearing that old thing, huh? It's warm, I said. He nodded, glancing around like he was rating the room on Yelp. You getting used to this place? I'm adjusting. That's good. Really good. He scratched the back of his neck, his tell. He always did that before saying something he knew I wouldn't like. You know, he began slowly. I've been thinking. Once the estate stuff clears, maybe we should list the house. Prices are high. Could be smart. I stared at him. My house? Well, it's not like you're using it. That sentence was a knife wrapped in cotton. I built that house with your father, I said. Sure, but I paid the taxes for 40 years. He shifted. His smile thinned. We're just trying to be practical. I stood. Thank you for visiting, I said. But I'm tired now. He blinked. Don't be like that. I said I'm tired. He started to turn away, then stopped when I added, oh, one more thing. He faced me, nervous. I found something, I said. In my coat pocket. His expression cracked. You did? He tried to sound casual. He failed. I nodded. A reminder. Of what? He asked tightly. That what's mine, I said softly, is still mine. He swallowed hard, then forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That's nice. It is, I said. Very nice. And I walked away from him. Not because I was done, but because he had no idea I was only getting started. The next afternoon, Andrew arrived again, this time dressed down, blending in with the steady stream of visitors. He signed in as Pastor William Sharp. Bless Rose Hill, and its love of clipboard's bureaucracy makes everything invisible. We met in the family lounge, a sad little room with fake ferns and a love seat that sighed under us. The check has been issued, he said quietly. The trust is fully operational. All distributions routed through intermediaries. Your identity is sealed. What's the next step? Revoking your son's control. Filing the injunction. After that, the exit. I nodded. No hesitation. He handed me my new will, my real name, bold and unshakable. It invalidated everything Thomas had forced into place. There's one more thing, Andrew said. Your son and daughter-in-law took photos of your home. Staged it. The listing goes live Monday. I closed my eyes. Not anger, not grief, just clarity. They won't get it, I said. No, he replied. They won't. The staff later said I seemed chipper that evening. Why wouldn't I be? When a woman everyone has written off learns she still has teeth, it tends to improve her mood. They put Lillian in room 107 because she didn't complain. That's the qualification here. Not need, not fairness, not dignity. Compliance. The heating in that room had been broken for days. The others on the hall were moved temporarily. But Lillian? They left her there. My breath fogs up the glass, she'd said wryly when I visited her. That's enough warmth for me. She was 84, sharp as a blade and dry as library dust. A former librarian, she spoke the way books do, clearly, cleanly, without wasted words. Her spine was straighter than most of the staff's. When she carried a teacup, it looked like a ritual. I liked her immediately. She didn't go to group activities. She didn't join crafts. She didn't participate in karaoke nights, even when Sandra begged for more cheerful engagement. They never ask themselves, she said once, why the old stop singing. They just keep handing out microphones. We began having tea together each afternoon in the rec room. She brought her own tea bags. The ones they serve here taste like boiled socks. I didn't argue. She was right. On the second day we sat together, I told her my secret. For reasons I couldn't explain, I trusted her, the way you trust someone who sees straight through you but chooses kindness instead of judgment. Everyone here calls me Doris, I said quietly. But outside this place, my name is something else now. She blinked once. Fascinating, she murmured. Go on. So I did. I told her about finding the ticket, about Andrew, about the trust, about the $62 million quietly barreling toward my future. I told her about Rosie, my granddaughter, the only member of my bloodline who remembered I existed without needing something from me. When I finished, she didn't clutch her chest or gape. She didn't ask, "What will you do with the money?" She simply poured more tea. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like I'm holding a loaded weapon in a room full of people who think I'm harmless." She smiled. "Good. Stay that way." After that, it became a ritual. 3 p.m. 2 chairs by the window. Her tea, my crossword folded in half. Sometimes we didn't talk. Sometimes she told me about her daughter who hadn't called in 18 months. Sometimes we just listened to the faint radio hiss from the common room. It was the closest thing to peace I'd had since walking into Rose Hill. One night, we played a quiet game. "What would you do?" she asked. "If they gave you the keys?" "I'd buy a small house by the water," I said. "I'd make tea in the mornings, eat when I want, sleep when I want, and I'd never ask permission again." "And you?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "I'd move to a town where nobody knows my name, above a bookstore, buy a cat, and I'd never explain myself again." We clinked our mugs. That was the last night I saw her. The next morning, her door was shut. At lunch, a nurse walked in and took the name tag off her door. No announcement, no memorial, no pause, just erased. Like she'd been a sticky note someone peeled off the wall. I asked what happened. Peacefully in her sleep, someone whispered. I sat in the rec room, staring at her empty chair. The cushion dent was still there, shaped by her small frame. No one else looked at it. Or maybe they had learned, as I was learning, that in places like this, grief has to be silent to survive. That night, I didn't write in my notebook, not a list, not a plan, not a thought. I simply wrote her name, Lillian, and beneath it, "I have to get out before they forget I was ever here too." The next morning, I took stock of my life, the way someone checks their pockets after losing something important. Questions I had never allowed myself to consider. What do I want when the bitterness fades? When revenge stops feeding me? When the money is safe? When the house isn't the point anymore? The answer was shockingly small. A window I can open without permission. My own mug. My own key. Quiet. I choose not quiet, forced upon me. For the first time since the ticket, I postponed Andrew's call. I needed to sit with myself, not my plans. Sandra invited me to join a new, therapeutic activity painting. No, I said. Still not your thing? She asked, confused. I'm choosing what is, I replied. She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Maybe I had. The elderly aren't supposed to choose anything other than dessert options. I didn't explain. That afternoon, I went to the back garden, the same patio where Andrew first told me the word trust, in a way that didn't feel like betrayal. The leaves were turning. Gold, brittle reds, soft brown edges. The wind was still. I reached into my pocket and found a tea bag, one of Lillian's. The good kind. That night, I brewed it slowly, deliberately. I poured it into the thick ceramic cup they gave me on my first day, the one with the chip in the handle no one else wanted. I drank it not for comfort, but for clarity. Grief does something strange to your vision. It sharpens some things and blurs others. After Lillian died, I saw Rose Hill more clearly than ever, the rushed footsteps, the hollow smiles, the way people disappeared without ceremony. I realized something simple and terrible. If I didn't leave soon, I would vanish the same way. A name removed from a door, a life packed into a plastic bin. So I began the next phase. Not escape, not revenge. Correction, a quiet shifting of power they would never see coming. It started with a letter delivered to my old house. Not from me, from Andrew's office, disguised as a company called Riverside Estate Consultants. A fictional real estate firm with a very real purpose. To remind Thomas and Marcia that what they touched without permission could be touched by others too. At 4:05 p.m., on a Tuesday, the time Marcia usually posted her curated life updates, a black Mercedes pulled into my driveway. The driver, dressed as if every stitch were ironed by God himself, handed Marcia a white envelope. No logo, no return address, just her name. Inside, an expression of interest to purchase 117 Dare Lane for $1.3 million. Cash, expedited, confidential. A bait so elegant it practically shone. 2 hours later, my room phone rang. Not the staff phone, my room phone, which only meant one thing. Rosie. Grandma, she whispered. Are you sitting down? I'm always sitting down, I said. She let out a shaky laugh. Mom got a letter. Some company wants to buy your house. Like, urgently. For $1.3 million. Dad is freaking out. Is he? I murmured. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. Did you do something? I smiled. You could say I reminded them that not everything is theirs just because they're standing on it. She exhaled. Dad keeps saying something doesn't add up. Good. Let him feel confusion for once. Thomas came first. No, Marcia. No entourage. Just him carrying a paper bag that smelled like liver and onions from the diner I used to love. He placed it on the table between us. I brought your favorite. I didn't touch it. He sat, folding his hands like a schoolboy rehearsing his apology. I've been thinking about what you said, he began. You were right about a lot of things. Handled, I said softly. That's the word you used. You handled me. He swallowed. We didn't mean to shut you out. We panicked. The doctor mentioned memory issues. And that thing with the stove, I didn't forget the stove. The knob was broken. He looked down. We made decisions we thought were smart. No, I said. You made decisions that were convenient. He exhaled, small and shaky. We're trying to fix things, Mom. We really are. Silence stretched between us, long enough for him to start shifting in his seat. Then the question he'd been waiting to ask. Mom, what did you mean when you said you found something in your coat? There it was. The real reason he came. I tilted my head. I meant exactly what I said. You found something important. I found a reminder, I said, that what's mine is still mine, that I haven't disappeared, that I still have choices. And teeth. Teeth? He repeated weakly. Metaphorical. His face twitched confusion, then fear, then an attempt to cover both badly. Do you need anything? He asked suddenly. Money? Clothes? We packed fast. I don't need a thing, I interrupted. Everything I need is already in motion. That landed like a stone in a pond. His eyes narrowed slightly, suspicion forming, but too late. "Mom," he whispered, "what are you planning?" I smiled. "You'll find out." He stood slowly, as if the room were tipping. "Are we okay?" I considered the word. It tasted false. "No," I said. "But we're honest now. That's a start." He left the bag of liver and onions on the table. I pushed it aside. "Give it to Hilda," I told the nurse later. "She still eats like she believes in miracles." 2 days later, they came together, Thomas and Marcia, dressed like visiting royalty, forced to walk through a servant's hallway. Sandra escorted them in with a smile, too tight to be genuine. "Your family's here," she said. Family. What a slippery word. Marcia sat with her legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded neatly, a smile that looked like she'd ironed it. "You look wonderful," she said brightly. "So elegant. Love that scarf." It wasn't a scarf. It was the top of an old sweater I cut to hide a bleach stain. "But sure. Perform." Thomas cleared his throat. "We just want to talk, Mom. Maybe? Clear the air." I nodded. He took a breath. "We realize we moved too fast with the house, and everything. Transition," Marcia added. "As in, helping you transition here." I raised an eyebrow. Transition. Beautiful word for kidnapping. Their smiles cracked, just a fraction. "We only want what's best for you," Marcia insisted. "You've made that very clear," I said. They exchanged looks. Then Thomas leaned forward. "About the letter." He swallowed. "You didn't mention anything about wanting to sell the house." "I don't." "Right," he rushed. "Right. Absolutely. We just want to understand who." "I didn't ask for it," I said. But I wasn't surprised. Marcia shifted. "The house just shouldn't sit empty. It's not safe. And the market—" "I'm not dead," I said. That shut them both up. "I'm not dead," I repeated. "And this is still my life." Silence. Thick, uncomfortable. "You acted otherwise," I continued calmly. "When you emptied my closets, when you cut off my accounts, when you signed my name to things I never saw, when you sold my piano." Thomas flinched. He didn't expect me to know about the piano. I stood. "Bring my car back," I said. "Your car?" he stammered. "The one you said you were thinking of selling." He blinked. "It's being used. It's registered to me." "Well, technically, yes, but then technically," I said softly. "It's theft." Marcia stood abruptly. "Maybe this was a mistake." "Not on my part," I said. They left rattled, confused, off balance. Good. They still had no idea how much ground they had already lost. That night, Sandra watched them walk out and said, "Family visits are always so cheerful." "Only when they're trying to hide something," I replied. I went to my room, sat by the window, and listened to the wind move through the trees like a voice clearing its throat. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't triumphant. I was ready. Another thread had been pulled, and the unraveling had begun. They cleared out Lillian's room in under an hour. No ceremony. No candle. No announcement over the intercom. Just 2 aides with a rolling bin, removing her entire existence from Rose Hill the way you'd peel a label off a jar. By lunchtime, a new resident had moved in. By dinner, there was a potted plant on the dresser, as if she had never breathed the same air as me. That was the moment I understood something with bone-deep certainty. If I didn't leave soon, I would vanish the same way. A name tag tossed into a drawer. A life folded into someone else's trash bag. So when the legal office called and said, "Mrs. Leland, the court date is set. Next Thursday," I didn't feel fear. I felt arrival. In the days leading up to the hearing, Rose Hill felt smaller. Not because the halls changed, but because I had. I walked slower, not from age, but from control. I ate what I wanted and left what I didn't. I spoke only when I chose to. The staff didn't understand it. Most old women here spoke like they were apologizing for taking up air, but I had stopped apologizing. The morning of the hearing, the air smelled like bleach and rain. Andrew arrived early, holding a folder the same way a surgeon holds a scalpel. "Ready?" he asked. Yes. There was no tremor in my voice. The quiver that used to live in my ribs was gone. We rode in silence to a courthouse that looked nothing like the ones on television. No grand doors, no marble columns, just beige walls and mismatched chairs that had seen too many people begging to be believed. Inside, Thomas was already seated. He looked smaller in a courtroom, less certain, less right. No, Marcia probably advised to stay home after her enthusiasm for managing my affairs. I didn't sit near him. I didn't even look at him until the clerk said, "Case number 4812. Petition for revocation of power of attorney." The judge was a woman with the kind of face that could slice through excuses. Andrew spoke first, calm, clean, surgical. He presented the financial inconsistencies, the house listing photographed without my consent, the bank withdrawals, the missing authorizations, the manipulated paperwork, the medical claims used to justify placing me at Rose Hill without evaluation, the fact that I never signed a single binding document. Each detail landed like a stone in still water. Thomas shifted. His lawyer whispered something, but no one interrupted. Then the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Leland," she said, "were you placed in care against your will?" "Yes." "And did you understand all documentation processed under your name?" "No, because I signed nothing." A murmur swept the back row. The judge nodded once, then asked, "Do you feel mentally capable of handling your own affairs?" "Yes." Andrew handed her the assessment, a clean bill of cognitive health from a licensed psychologist. She read it in silence. Then she looked at Thomas. "Your client claims he acted in good faith," she said flatly. "But good faith requires transparency, which is not present here." He said nothing. She turned back to me. "Mrs. Leland, are you requesting full revocation of the existing power of attorney?" "Yes." "And do you wish to assign it to another family member?" "No." "To a third party?" "No. I wish to hold it myself." Another silence. Then the judge lifted her stamp. "Request granted." One sharp thud. And just like that, my name returned to me. Thomas followed me outside. "Ma, wait." I turned. He looked like a boy again, the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knees. Except now he was crying because he'd scraped me. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "But you did. I thought I was doing the right thing." "No," I said calmly. "You thought you were the only one who could." He swallowed hard. "I don't want your money," he added quickly. "I never did." I smiled softly, not cruelly, just truthfully. "That's good," I said, "because now you will never touch it." He blinked. A tremor passed through him. I stepped closer. "You treated me like I was a phase to be managed. But I raised you. I stood outside your school concerts. I worked double shifts to keep food on the table. I taught you how to tie your shoes, how to spell your name." I paused. "Now I'm teaching you how to lose." He opened his mouth, but by the time he found words, I was already walking away. I didn't look back. Not once. 2 days later, Andrew arrived at Rose Hill with the final papers. The exit plan was ready. Not a dramatic escape, a legal transfer for independent reassessment of living needs. A nurse signed the forms without reading them. Sandra hugged me goodbye with a stale smile. No one asked where I was going. No one ever does. I left with 2 bags, one with clothes, one with documents. But I left something behind too, tucked under Hilda's pillow, a lawyer's phone number, and a line from Lillian. "To the day no one asks where you're going." The car waiting outside wasn't a taxi. Black, quiet, unmarked. Freedom, disguised as transportation. We drove past strip malls, gas stations, familiar roads turning unfamiliar, until the scenery shifted to low water and quiet hills. At the end of a narrow street, a small white cottage waited. Blue shutters, new wood, the faint smell of sea salt. Mine. Andrew had stocked the kitchen with tea and bread. There was one chair by a window overlooking the water. The first thing I did was open the window. No permission needed, no staff watching, no schedule telling me when to breathe. That evening, I made tea and opened a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "I was never small. I was only made to feel that way." That night, I slept without a lock on the door, without pills handed to me in cups, without someone checking if I belonged where I was. I slept, and in the morning, I woke up when I wanted, made toast with too much butter, sat in the sun, listened to my own breath, and for the first time in a very long while, I belonged to myself again.